Hey Melvin,
Hello.
do you want to give like an introduction about yourself, what you're doing, and especially how you get into Jupiter in the first place? I think people get to know you better from there as well.
Yeah, sure. I'm Melvin. I work on the Metis team, and I actually came out with the name Metis.
Ooh.
That was in 2023 when I first joined the company. And so the segue. I never told this on camera, but for a number of years I've been interested in crypto. I was a user. At some point, I kind of knew that Meow was in the space, and I knew Meow from university, and I had the feeling of like maybe just reach out and just ask, like, oh, what you're doing, and find out more. But I was quite comfortable in my previous job, so I didn't really act on it. And it was one year I was in Singapore and we had a community conference, so I usually go there. And that year I happened to meet Meow and May at the conference.
Yeah.
And we started talking because we're all friends, and talked about what he was doing. And he was working on Jupiter, which I didn't know, and I thought that was quite impressive because I've heard of Jupiter at that point. And we talked more, and I then got on as a part-time contractor for a while. Yeah, and then eventually I became full-time.
Makes sense.
I think you joined quite early on compared to like a lot of us, and maybe you can describe a bit more about during that time what problems that you guys were solving compared to like now, and like the major difference between this gap.
Yeah. How is the company different from then to now in terms of what we are focusing on and the problems?
Okay, so this was I was a part-time around March of 23, and specifically, in fact, I'm still working on the same problems as we were, because there's always new iterations, problems that we fix. The company was a lot smaller at the time. I think in Singapore we had like 5 people, and I remember whenever we had like meeting, we would go to Meow's place, which is a very tiny condo. It's a 1-bedroom condo. So imagine like 5 people squeezed in a tiny condo.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think the problems then was still similar to now, except we were facing more latency issues, right? I mean, for quoting on the website can be quite slow. So I think one of the big fixes was to completely change the way we were doing it. I think in the past we were following somewhat similar to what Uniswap was doing. So they open sourced their router on GitHub. And so our method was quite similar to theirs, which is quite like I would say brute force, because we're just checking all possible combinations of markets to serve a particular trade. So I worked on it a little bit and we came up with something a little bit more efficient to tackle this problem. That doesn't involve doing the all possible checks.
How do you think the vision of Jupiter has evolved since 2023? Like, do you think we have the same goals, same vision since the past 3 years?
Definitely our ambition has grown a lot more. I mean, the early days, obviously Jupiter was mostly focused on the swap experience, making a very simple UI. And our UI has gotten more complicated. And, as Meow says, over time there's a period of consolidation, right? We get a little bit more complex because we keep adding stuff. And at a certain point, we will say, let's simplify again and let's make it easy.
I think we are at that stage now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So now it's coming back to that. In fact, we're going back to an earlier kind of UI where it was much more simple. Yeah.
I feel even now with the APIs, we are consolidating Onchain Metis under one API soon, which is just going to be the swap API.
Right.
So yeah, we're going to announce this tomorrow on stage, and this podcast will obviously go out after that, so we are safe to say that.
Okay.
But yeah, I feel that we have a lot of offerings, and now it's the time to kind of hone in on like what we really excel at.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, and also I think just talk a little bit more about like API. I mean, back in those days, the API was also quite different. I don't even know if we have a dedicated. I think we do have a website for the API, but it was mostly Xiong doing the developer support in those days. Yeah, on Discord.
Even till last year, I think.
Yeah, start of last
Even
year.
right now, I think.
Yeah. Some things never change.
Yeah.
Actually, Melvin, since you've like architected like majority of what Metis was and what Metis is now, is there like something that is that might still be in Metis that keeps you up at night and like you're trying to solve or have not solved it yet, that is like, it keeps bugging you, you know?
That's a great question. Maybe I can do a little update to my Breakpoint talk. So I gave a talk at Breakpoint in 2023 on Metis with Zheng Yu, actually, one of our engineers at the time.
Yeah.
And that talk mostly focused on the problem of routing a single split, as we call it in our terminology, which is all of the funds go through a sequence of markets and then to reach the output token. The majority of what we worked on since then was really the problem of splitting, which is actually dividing up the funds into different percentages. Maybe 5% goes one way and 95% goes another way to make use of all available liquidity on chain. And this is especially important for larger trades. So that's the majority of what we worked on up till today. And the method we use, I think, still has certain limitations. And we do want to explore new alternatives to overcome those. Yeah.
So I have two questions, but the first one that I'm going to ask you right now is, what makes you eligible as an engineer to work on something that routes billions and trillions in volume? I'm very curious on what skill set do you have that made you eligible to work on Metis?
That's a great question.
Yes,
So it turns out I've been working on routing also in a prior job, I guess. That was more for physical. So basically, I think most people are more familiar with routing in the physical sense, where you're trying to move from point A to B and you look at maps or some other app. So there was a problem I was working on in the logistics space, which was called the picker routing problem. In picker routing, you're in a warehouse and there's this agent, could be a person, could be a robot, which is called a picker. And the picker's role is to get an order, and like I say, make an online order for some groceries, right? You have like 10 different items in your cart. And so this picker is going to go around the warehouse to different shelves to get your order from each of these shelves, and then go back to this packing area where they pack your order into a package to be delivered to you. So this picker has to, if it's a person, he has to walk throughout the warehouse. And this walking part is typically the slowest part of the picking process, right? Because actually getting items off the shelf is like scanning it is pretty fast. So we were trying to optimize like how do we save time for the person doing the picking. So that's a variation of the routing. Obviously, on-chain market routing it's very different. It is in a very different space. So it's not like we're not measuring distances, trying to get you the best price, right? Especially actually looking at the amount of output tokens you receive. But I think largely the theory kind of is very similar. It's still about looking for a sequence of edges or sequence of paths that gives you the best outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But isn't it a little different when you're dealing with like user funds, which might be in like 6 figures, 7 figures?
Different.
it's just all math for you.
So I think that there's the notion of abstraction, right? Where we try to look at what's the underlying computational problem.
Yeah.
And in some sense, we think of the input as some number n. Doesn't matter what n is. The idea is to create something general, right? That works for whether you're doing $1 or you're working on $1 million.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
That is a good analogy. Did what you study in university directly convert to what you're doing right now? Like, did you study computer science engineering?
Yeah. I studied computer science. And in fact, I did a PhD in computational biology. And you might think that biology is completely unrelated to what we're doing. But there's a funny story with that, because in the area of biology we're studying, we also work on a particular structure, which is called the breakpoint graph.
Yeah.
And you might know in Solana, we have this big annual event called Breakpoint. And obviously they have a different meaning in biology, but it's the same word, right? Breakpoint graph. And it's also a graph. So a graph is a bunch of vertices and nodes connected by edges. So I didn't work on the breakpoint graph problems. I worked on a slightly different problem, but ultimately a lot of these problems are related to finding the best structure or best solution for some given problem.
Melvin, since you mentioned you have a PhD, right? Was there any like learning specific from your PhD is there any skills that that people can get insight on from your PhD?
Okay, I would say there's a lot of techniques, methods that people have looked at from the literature, and by literature I guess I mean like publish scientific articles, and that might be an overlooked resource these days. I mean, we look more for like code snippets or open source projects and stuff like that. So I think part of like the value add, I mean, because previously, as I say, we were using the looking at the open source router that Uniswap published, right? If you're someone familiar with the literature on this problem, you would know that the way computer scientists approach this problem in the literature is very different from what you see in the implementation.
Yeah.
We think about a lot of different problems, not just one specific thing, but looking at a variety of similar problems across the whole space. And you can somehow bridge techniques from a different problem into your problem. And I think that's where a lot of innovation happens. So it's good to be knowledgeable about, what are similar looking problems and what have people done on them.
Do you think, like, in the current age of like AI and everything, does that skill still, like, for example, finding those similar problems or like publishings, and does like AI completely replace that, or do you think like you still need like both skill at the same time?
Well, AI is definitely helpful. I mean, it's very helpful for doing what we call literature search. So the difficulty of literature search is that different people in different areas use different words to mean the exact same thing. When you do a search, if the good old search, if you type in some keywords, it might not surface all the relevant literature. So if you ask the agents, and they get increasingly good at this, about your problem, they will be able to bring up relevant literature, even if you use different words. But I think the key thing is you have to ask them specifically to give you this information. Yeah.
Do you use any like AI in your workflows?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I do. Because in my line of work, I guess I write a lot of POC. So just to check if a particular approach would work. So I mean, sometimes things sounds good in theory, but it doesn't actually work. Because, in all the different markets that we support, they all have their idiosyncrasies. Yeah. So there's no one simple way to model all of them. So we actually have to create a simple POC to evaluate if it's working. And also, like, in terms of performance, in practice, we care about milliseconds. In the theoretical research, we often care about asymptotics, which is like the growth rate of the running time with respect to the size of the input. And usually we ignore constant factors. But if I look at what my work these days it involves mostly constant factors, which is like, can we reduce it by another 50% or something?
Yeah.
Right.
If you were to today rebuild Metis, would you do anything different?
Wow, that's a good question. Let me rebuild. I think Metis has decent foundations. Let's say if we don't have any splits at all the funds go through a sequence of AMMs. That is kind of a soft problem in certain sense. There are known techniques to do this. The complication mostly on Solana is that we have a constrained transaction. So we're only able to fit a limited amount of markets into a single transaction. But for no split, it's probably fine. So the biggest problem is it's still with splitting. And I wouldn't say... So the foundation is still the no split solver. And when we add splitting, we have to find some way to combine the two things. And I think that would still apply. So in a sense, the architecture probably wouldn't change that much. Yeah, but obviously, over time, the implementation itself has gotten quite complicated. So I think if we were to rewrite it, we would have to clean up the architecture significantly in terms of the implementation.
Yeah.
Because over time, we've added a lot of features and they're all gated behind feature flags.
Yeah.
And that has grown quite a bit.
So you're the only person I know that has known Meow from before. I mean, there would be more in the company for sure. Has Meow changed over years in terms of how excited he is and how like ambitious he is about just getting the best out of people? Like,
I think it's more excited these days. As far as
with age, he has gotten more energetic.
Yeah, I would say so. But it's been a while though. I mean, since we last did that project together. I mean, it's definitely different, right? When you're sort of running a company versus doing on a project, I think.
Yeah.
Because the project is something that you get from your professors, right? And something you have to do. So I think there's definitely a lot more enthusiasm when you're working on something that aligns with your interests or aligns with your long-term goals.
Does that enthusiasm also come with disagreements?
There's always points of disagreement, I think. But as what Meow was sharing just now earlier, it's really about understanding, right? I mean, what are the constraints people are facing, and why did they do things?
Being more
way?
empathetic.
Yeah, exactly. So I think over time, and I do see that change, right, where he was talking about it with all of us.
Yeah. I think this is a good spot to end this on. But yeah, we want to just tell you that we have named this podcast Nobody Breaks Like Jupiter.
Breaks.
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about some breakage?
Yeah, because we keep deprecating things. So I thought.
Oh, that. Well, there's also the breakage in production, obviously. I mean,
Yeah. Oh, that has happened many times.
Yes.
In my second week when I joined, I think I broke the API gateway.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the other side of nobody ships like Jupiter, right? Nobody breaks like Jupiter either.
Yep.
Yeah, you
This
need to
is
break
the-
things to ship things.
This is the other internal side that people don't see usually.
Yes.
Nice to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, great being here. Thanks.